Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, and Nicholas, aka Shady Bacon, and our co-host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. Almost forgot to introduce myself there in the intro. But this past weekend, we had the New York homestand event, and we finally got our fifth winner from the homestands. That was New York, the second team to defend their homestand event. And so, yes, they broke the curse of the homestand events, and they also kind of fell in line with your predictions of them doing extremely well at this event. I mean, I didn't doubt that they were going to do well. However, I did not see them doing as well as they did and actually winning the
Yeah.
event in the end.
I
So,
yeah, I mean that was definitely impressive by all means. So I mean definitely GG's to New York for winning the whole event. Even though I predicted that they were going to make it to the finals, I did not predict the win. So near perfect bracket.
yeah. And I think Toronto probably threw a bit of a wrench into kind of your predictions, at least for that final, as well as
True.
probably everyone's
Everybody's
predictions, as we'll
predictions.
touch on that later on. But we're going to jump right into that New York homestand event. With the first matchup that we did see, it was the Paris Legion versus the Toronto Ultra. The Toronto Ultra took that in 3-1 fashion over the Paris Legion. First map was Gunrunner Hardpoint. That was 250 to 189. Second map was St. Petro S&D. Paris Legion took that 6-3. And then Toronto Ultra closed out the series, taking the St. Petro Dom and the Hackney Hardpoint, 157 to 147 and 250 to 237, respectively. So pretty close maps there at the end to close out the series. However, I guess it's just still the woes for the Paris Legion. We are going to see later on that they actually finally do pick up a win, since I believe it had been around 90 days or so since they had won a series. So that was
Yeah, I think it
quite
was
a
I think
lengthy amount of time.
I think they announced 89 days on the cast.
89 days, so almost 90 days. So
Jeez.
pretty much around 3 months, which is crazy to think about. That was, yeah, it was since the London home series, I want to say. Or they made it, no, they got one more win after after the London homestand event since, yeah, so it's been a very long time for the Paris Legion. I think that's to be expected now. We've talked on it. They're kind of, one, they're not performing, and also two, teams have kind of caught on to their play style. And we've brought that up many a times throughout kind of this season and this podcast. Is at the end of the season, a lot, at least why I think the Paris Legion was so good, was because they were a huge unknown. They were boot camping in Europe. And so when they came over, they had all the European strats and kind of that European map set. And a lot of the North American teams weren't really kind of prepared for that, as the maps that were popular with the European players primarily being that Ramazda, it was not very popular with the North American teams, and so they probably didn't put as much thought into kind of all the different things that they can do on that map. Moving on to the second series that we saw on that weekend, it was the Chicago Huntsmen versus the London Royal Ravens. Chicago Huntsmen took this 3-1 over the London Royal Ravens. And London Royal Ravens took the first map. They took the Gunrunner Hardpoint. That was a bit unexpected, I would say. I think
Yeah.
in this series, both of us kind of thought it would go to Chicago in the end, as we did predict it would go to Chicago. However, I don't think we saw Chicago taking the S&D and dropping that first hard point. Yeah, so London took the first hard point, 250 to 201 on Gunrunner. That is one of their better hardpoint maps. Then Chicago answered back, taking a convincing Piccadilly S&D 6-2. They took the St. Petro Dom afterwards, 164 to 149, and then the Hackney Hardpoint 250 to 210. So we keep on seeing these like glimpses from London where they're not a bad team, but they're just not a good enough team to really move out of kind of the position that they're in. They currently find themselves at 7th in the standings with a 30-point lead over Optic Gaming LA. And they're 20 points behind the Minnesota Rocker and 30 points behind the New York Subliners. So the other teams that are below them, tied at 70 points, is Paris Legion, Toronto Ultra. Out
Yeah.
of those,
Oh, go ahead.
the only team that really has a chance of passing them is Optic, because they're the only team that has only attended 7 events so far, and London has attended 8. So Optic still has 2 more events. So Optic is really the only team that has a chance of passing up London. So right now it seems like kind of London's set into that seventh place spot, barring some kind of miracle run from them in one of these weekends or a miracle run from this Optic Gaming team at either this event or the one after.
I really do wish to see London get into some sort of form, but it just seems like there's always something, and it seems like every tournament they play in is something different too. And when you have that sort of inconsistency, yeah, you're pretty much doomed to mediocrity. Fortunately, with the way everything's set up, they've done well enough that if they can just skate by and get it to click by champs, then all of a sudden we have a new, CDL champion. Will that happen? Unlikely. But I think that they've gotten themselves into the game enough. They've gotten themselves into the race enough that they could potentially figure it all out and it'll all click for champs. But I, I, I don't know. I don't know, Nick. Like I could definitely see them. I don't know. I can't even see them winning a championship at this point or a tournament.
No, I can't either. I think we've seen London kind of in the same spot throughout the entire season where they're
Yeah,
just on the outside, kind of looking into that top five, where I don't think any of the teams that are in the top five, I don't see London realistically beating them. And that kind of is that sucks for London, one, but it's not like too bad since I like with their seventh place spot, like they definitely want to keep that because if they're in seventh, their opponent more than likely is going to be the Minnesota Rocker going into champs. And this past weekend, they beat the Minnesota Rocker. So that there was a very big confidence boost, I think, for them. And probably a pleasant outcome for them kind of moving on into the future is knowing that okay, we've beaten them once, we can beat them again when we are going to eventually have that rematch and then continue on the bracket and maybe make something happen. But with this, I don't know like why this London Royal Ravens roster just isn't able to beat the teams. I don't think it's the players. Honestly, I think their players are fine. I think it just might have something to do with the way they play the maps. I don't know. That's kind of like an easy thing to say, but
yeah.
when
Like
they're
I said,
consistently not able to beat these top teams, it there's an issue, and I don't see it realistically being kind of the players because I think they all have the talent to win. It's just there's some other factor kind of inhibiting them from actually having the success that they want.
I agree. I think that this roster is a very solid roster, and we've held them in such a high regard for a long time because of the players on the roster. That being
Yeah.
said, they really just haven't figured it out.
Yeah,
And
and some people are like pointing at Shawnee as the player to like remove, but honestly, I in past years I would say yeah, Shawnee was kind of the lone man out on some of his roster, but on this London Royal Ravens roster, he honestly isn't performing subpar, especially in S&D. Him and Wuskins were clutching up an insane amount this weekend in S&D. Their S&D performance alone, I think, should keep him on the team. We're not able to see his overall KD from the event, which gives a decent look at kind of how he performed on the weekend. But everyone that's kind of like calling for Shawnee's head, calling to get him off the team, put like Rated or someone else back in. I don't really agree with that. I don't think Shawnee's performance has been poor enough to really
oh, absolutely not.
justify that.
No, and the thing is that like one week it's Dylan, one week it's Scraps, one week it's Shawnee, one week it's even Weskins. But I mean, you just like I said, there's no way you can pinpoint what the problem is. It seems like there's a different problem, every time that they play. So,
Yeah, and if it's a different player like each weekend, it almost kind of feels that it's a teamwork factor. Like they're just not playing together well enough. If it's like one player's always kind of struggling, it feels more like that kind of player's trying to either do too much or the team's not helping that player enough in aiding him in like executing his role efficiently.
right.
All right, but That was the Chicago London Royal Ravens matchup. After that one, we saw the Atlanta FaZe versus the LA Gorillas. Atlanta FaZe took that in 3-1 fashion over the Gorillas. They took the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 210. They lost the Gunrunner S&D 6-4. And then they finished out the series taking the Hackney Dom and the Hackney Hardpoint 168 to 150 and 250 to 200. Not too much to really say here. The LA Gorillas, we didn't expect them to beat the Atlanta FaZe. I thought they might have been able to take one more of the respawns, and they were relatively close, but just not close enough, honestly, to kind of warrant me saying, yeah, they definitely probably should have won one. But
They
not,
didn't play well at all this weekend. I'm just gonna be real. I would be totally fine not talking about the Gorillas because I mean, in all
I
honesty,
think it's important to talk about them in their losers round matchup versus the Paris Legion, since that's one that we both thought they should have taken.
true. And I mean, that's more of Paris showing up rather than LA, kind of mess in the bed. So, but I mean, like anybody could have said that Atlanta was gonna beat the Gorillas. Like that was a pretty easy call out.
Yeah.
The important thing though, this match did say that. So if you weren't following in the news, for those listening at home, if you weren't following the news, which I don't know how, there was a huge controversy about gentlemen's agreements concerning the AUG. It was the AMs were like, oh yeah, well we're gonna ban the AUG or GA the AUG, and then they said, all right, we're just gonna follow what the CDL does, and then we'll talk about that. And then since the AMs GA'd the AUG first, CDL started talking, and then a couple teams were like, yeah, let's do it. Well, didn't sit very well with some teams, being
Yeah.
Atlanta FaZe and Dallas
Especially
Empire.
teams leading up to an event. I mean,
Well,
yeah, I completely agree with the point. You're banning a gun
oh yeah,
3 days before an event.
and I agree.
Uh,
Normally you wouldn't want to do that. Atlanta didn't like that. They felt like they put their time in, and they said that they were not going to follow the gentleman's agreement. Now, this game did show
yeah,
that
and
Atlanta.
I think the other important thing there is that Atlanta said they weren't going to follow it for this event, but they'd be down to follow it for ones after. Which
Right.
teams were like, no, 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 no. You're blacklisted from scrims, which is a whole nother childish
Yeah, like
just
there's
response
just
to stuff.
I I
But
would
we'll let you. I'll let you finish up your point because this is something I was going to talk about later in talking about how GAs are stupid. But I'll let you finish up your point so I can. I'll dive into kind of my take on them.
Yeah, so this match was important because I think this was probably the most tuned in match of all time because everybody was waiting to see, everybody run guns ablazing, five smokes, trophy systems galore and hard point and all this other really degenerate stuff. And it didn't happen. I think Atlanta decided that they were going to play ball and it was kind of unfortunate because I would have loved to see what happened there, and see the kind of meltdown to this already crazy season, but I guess it wasn't in the cards. We're stuck wondering with the what if. But for the record, they were blacklisted basically half of the week leading up into the New York home series. So they were blacklisted, and then at the tournament they said, okay, we're going to follow the gentleman's agreement. So
Yeah, and pretty much what blacklisted means is that pro teams will refuse to scrim you until you cave in and accept the GAs, which aren't even they're gentlemen's agreements. So if you're unfamiliar with the gentlemen's agreement, pretty much is just the pro players agreeing not to use something because they deem it uncompetitive or unfair or just doesn't take skill. And it's not actually something that is enforced by the CDL rules.
yes. In the CDL rules, it's important to note that the CDL rules are dictated by the developer, I believe. Like the developer has to sign off on it, and the developer, well, Infinity Ward has
The
been,
developer and the league.
yes. Well, like that's what I'm saying. Infinity Ward has
Yeah.
been notoriously bad about supporting the competitive scene. I don't even think they want anything to do with it. But I mean, all this started because the MP5 got a huge nerf, and then turns out it didn't really matter because the MP5 is still nasty, and people were still using it this whole tournament.
Yeah, the MP5 it got nerfed. I believe they GA'd 10 millimeter, which was what was causing the MP5 to be able to kill ARs from across map because it allowed the MP5 to kill in 4 bullets across map, where an AR it would take 5 bullets, which is just stupid. And yeah, that shouldn't be in the game.
Yeah.
I can completely agree with that being something GA'd. It makes sense. At least, like, to me, SMG should not kill ARs at range. And obviously that's been in the game for an extremely long time, and IW hadn't done anything about it,
Well,
even though
until
we'd seen it the whole season.
now, whenever they decided
Well,
that
they nerfed it, but like 10 millimeter is still allowed, and that's a point I'll bring up after I finish talking about kind of the AUG issue, and
right.
that was the AUG's been in the gun since the start of the game. It hasn't been touched, to my knowledge, since the start of the game.
No, they
So
didn't
it's
do anything to
always
it.
been an option for players to use. And it's not until SMG players actually start using it that pros are like, no, we don't like you using that, or you're not allowed to use it. Banned, GA'd. Like, what? It's so fucking stupid. Like, I'm sorry, but
Yeah, it's well,
it's been in there since the start of the game, as has the MP5 with 10 mil. You ban them from using the 10 mil, makes sense. And then something that no one's used since the start of the game that people start using, you just instantly get rid of it without actually like seeing if it's broken or not. And the one clip I kept on seeing over and over again when people were talking about this issue was a Priesta clip of him gunning God RX with it. Okay, that's 1 kill out of like 10,000, which I'm pretty sure is like what Priesta used to argue it. And then Slasher's like, oh yeah, but you use the MP5 longer, so it doesn't matter that you've been practicing with the AUG. Yes, it does. If you've been practicing with the AUG for like 5 days or whatever amount of time leading up into an event, that's changing how you're playing the game. It doesn't matter, like, okay, yeah, you played with the MP5, you know how to play with the MP5. You haven't really played with the MP5 without 10 mil, so it's going to be completely different. And you haven't been practicing with it, at least Priesta hadn't. Beezy had stated that he had never moved away from the MP5. And as you can see during this tournament, that's why he was the best performer out of probably any of the SMGs. He was the best performer at the event. He had the
yes.
best KD out of everyone at the event. Priesta, he struggled a crap ton. And yeah, he's had some bad events like in the past couple times we have seen FaZe, but like I'm attributing a decent amount of that to him literally practicing with a gun for a 5 however many a week leading up to the event, and then he just has to switch back to a different gun that he hasn't used since that 10 millimeter ban, GA. And like a lot of the GAs are just out of control and just stupid. And there's never a good way of doing GAs because none of the teams are ever going to agree. The teams are going to want to get the biggest advantage for their team. And you can say, oh, yeah, majority rules or whatever. But majority rules is a crappy way of doing things, in part because the minority always feels that they're getting bullied and
Yes.
being forced to agree with the majority, which creates a lot of resentment within the league. And so it should never be up to the players. It should always be up to a neutral body that can hear the players' arguments, look at it from an outside-ish perspective, because they obviously have to have a decent amount of knowledge about the game and whatnot. But it should never be up to the players. And I'm sick of the looming threat of being blacklisted from scrims. Like that is the stupidest thing ever. You're literally throwing a tantrum against the team because they don't want to listen to your unofficial rule set. And so it's like playing tag with someone but then not liking the normal rules of tag, so you make up your own rules and then someone says no, that's dumb, we're just going to play normal, and then you just exclude them from the game of tag. You're pretty much just an asshole. And I don't there's no good way of enforcing teams to not blacklist other teams from scrims because they can always make up some random excuse. But I would love to see the league fine don't fine the players. That's not going to solve anything. They don't
Right.
give a shit. Fine the org or fine the companies that fund the org. That's how you're going to get change to happen, not
Oh,
by
for sure.
finding the players.
Yeah, they
Because
don't
if
care.
you find the org, or you find the companies that are sponsoring the org or running the org, or is the parent company or the controlling power, they're not going to be happy. And you can find them for a lot more than you can find a player for.
Yes, you can.
You find the company, they're going to be pissed. They're going to force that player to make a change, or they're off the roster. Guaranteed. Because these are businesses and they don't like to lose money. So
Yeah, especially
stop
after
finding
they.
players, start finding orgs and their parent companies. That's kind of one point, but yeah, just the whole blacklisting thing, it's just so childish, and just like all you need is a couple teams, like 3 or 4, to just say no, we're not going to do that. And then the other thing was they were threatening to use 5 smokes, which honestly I would love to see teams use just 10 smokes on the map or whatever. Because at the end of the day, I still think the better team is going to win. You can throw whatever quote unquote randomness you want into the game. To me, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the better team is going to be the better team. And like they were trying to ban the knife because you could throw a smoke and then a guy could run around through the smoke with a knife and kill people. That's not randomness. That's just being smart. You can throw a nade in the smoke. You could shoot in the smoke. You could not be in the smoke. Like there's a ton of ways to play around stuff that the pros are either too lazy or too stupid to understand, in
I
my eyes.
I will say
Because
that.
playing in pubs, you run into a lot of cheesy, absurd stuff. But you just learn to deal with it. You adapt.
Yeah, I agree, but I think with the smokes thing, that went deeper than players not wanting to adapt and more for watchability. Like kind of like how Torque was in
It doesn't screw up watchability. We got X-ray vision. I can still see what's happening.
right, but I mean like for a you have to imagine like there if you had 10 smokes on the map, the entire map would be covered with smoke the entire time.
All right, well, it was never in past CODs. One,
The smoke's a lot different in this COD, which is
it is
why
a lot different.
yeah, and
Not too much.
the
Not that different, to
The
my
other
knowledge.
the other thing with the smokes, and this is the big difference, was you sometimes can catch name tags, and this is a developer thing, which I don't know if they even fixed or if they're ever gonna fix it. It's pretty late now. So you can sometimes see name tags through smoke, which does give unfair advantage, and it just depends on like I've seen a lot of different things. I've seen players like Celium, for example, sit in vendor booth in Piccadilly and move his move his aim stick around left and right while going prone, so that way he can pick up aim assist. Like, there's a lot of different ways in this game that you can get information that you shouldn't necessarily get. So there would be a way to abuse the smokes, and I agree with that GA. I agree with most of the GAs. The AUG GA was kind of maybe a little rushed, but I think that the mindset behind that GA was you wanted to make sure that players had enough time to prepare for it, and the MP5 nerf and all of this other stuff was just kind of tumultuous. So it gives other teams more unfair advantages because you have a team that needed to practice to do this for a week, and it's just yes, it's kind of annoying, but at the same time, like I kind of get where the players are at this point. Not to mention that they are incredibly frustrated with this game. If you even go on Twitter, get a whiff of Twitter, you'll see that players they're just done. They've just kind of given up on this game,
Yeah.
and they're tired of all the changes and all the ridiculous stuff. And
Well, there haven't been any changes, at least like until now. It took them 6 months or something to actually patch multiplayer,
well, I mean,
which is
they're
kind of what started the whole GA craziness.
yes, that's part of it. The other part of it was you
I did
had
hear they fixed cold-blooded though, so now thermals don't work, but the issue is thermals are still banned by the CDL rule set. So that's another issue. Like, if they fix cold-blooded, they don't need thermals to be banned anymore in the CDL rule set, and then teams can run however many smokes they want because you got thermals and you got cold-blooded. So
Yeah, I don't disagree. You know, that part, like, there's just so many other like little mechanics. It's just, yes, you would love to see them try and figure out a way to make it all work and make it happen, but
I mean,
at the
that
end of the
that to me
day,
makes sense. Like, that works. I mean, you have cold-blooded, so that stops thermals from being broke. And then you have thermals, which help you with smokes. And then if you don't want to be spotted through the smoke, you have cold-blooded.
right?
And if someone has cold-blooded, you can't run EOD, which means that if you're in the smoke with cold-blooded, someone can just throw a nade on
No
you
innate and
unless you
kill
got a
you. Yeah,
trophy.
and
So
and maybe that works. Like I said,
yeah, it's kind of hard to make that decision now without any testing. However,
exactly. And
they threw this GA in right before the event. We see what I would say is a positive change from, I thought this weekend was a lot more interesting and easy. It was a lot easier to follow. I mean, there was a stat
oh
that said
yeah, I
the
mean,
engagements was significantly lower. I think it was 250 on average compared to like the 350 or 380 on average in the old meta. And now I'm hearing that 10 millimeter is un-GA'd. So they literally just guinea pigged an entire event with their GAs, and then they said, no, we didn't like what we saw, and then we go back to this old play style of
yeah,
the, like, what are you like? It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Make up your minds. One, don't use a whole event as a guinea pig when four teams aren't at that event. They get to just sit back, laugh, and watch as teams struggle and maybe fail when they shouldn't be because you decided to throw in a GA 3 days before an event, and you take no negative effect from it. And like the people that I've been seeing talk the most about these GAs is freaking Slasher and his crybaby team.
yeah. I agree with that. Slasher, well, yeah, all of Optic has been pretty vocal about this, and it seems like they've always had an excuse as to why they can't perform as well as everybody else.
Yeah, I
Um,
can tell you right now, Optic, the reason you guys suck is because you suck. I told you, I predicted at the beginning of the year this team would be what, 8th place overall, 9th place overall, and that's right where they're at. So it's not because of connection. It's not because of the meta. It's not because of whatever stupid GAs you guys throw out. It's because you guys suck as a team. That's
yeah,
why you're in 8th place. Accuracy said it best too. What he said
yeah,
about Dashy on his stream. He says, "I hate the scapegoat of saying a player doesn't like the game, so they're bad at it. It's their fucking job to play the game.
it is their
So
job.
it doesn't matter if they don't like it. If they don't like it, they can go retire like Karma did."
You know, you have to also kind of think, well, there's a reason why I'm a competitor. There's a reason why I want to compete. And I mean, in the back of your head, you have to think, well, I want to get that first place. I want to win. It's just unfortunate that the kind of, I don't know, the chemistry and how everything works at Optic is, I think at first Slasher was trying to, be Slasher, but I think he fell into the sort of like TJ mentality where it's a connection thing. Oh yeah, these tournaments don't count because they're online or something
It
like
only
that.
doesn't count until they win.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was
I mean, I guarantee you there were probably people on New York that were saying, yeah, these online tournaments don't count, and now they win one. And I guarantee you Donnie Temp is counting this up as his first championship, even though it's online. So
oh yeah, of course
there's just a lot of inconsistency in their mindset, and it's annoying.
no, and I mean, without getting too much into it, you have to like consider, you know, that's kind of how I don't want to say humanity or how people work, but nobody ever wants it to be their fault, and it hurts whenever it is your fault. So anyway, I think we went down a long rabbit hole on Atlanta, LA, even though I didn't want to really spend a lot of time on that match. I did
Yeah,
want to
and
spend
I think
time,
there's like one more thing I want to bring up while we're talking about
yeah.
like counting a championship versus online and LAN. I'm 100% cannoning all of these. I don't care what people say, online, LAN, whatever. You look at the standings, there's been zero change since it's moved to LAN. The one change is like kind of Minnesota, and they've fallen down a bit. Okay, well, the one big change is New York. They moved up the standings. But
Yes.
they were at the last event they were at, that was a LAN, was LA, where they had Happy, who's a bad player. So after that, they made the change with Mac, and they instantly started seeing success. Some people might say that was the move to online. I say that's kind of bullshit since they're in New York. I don't think that's like a super crazy connection area. And I don't think there's any servers super close to them. I think they said there was, when Clayster was talking about, there's one in Columbus, North Carolina, I think he said one was, and then in Texas, I think those were the, no, it was Chicago. There was one in Chicago, one in Columbus, and then one in Texas, I think, is what he was saying.
Right.
But so they don't have a crazy advantage, I would say, since they're all in New York, to my knowledge. That's like the one big change. Outside of that, Florida, they were already a top 5 team. They moved up a bit. They made a roster change. They had already won at LAN with their old roster, so you can't say that was a crazy change. Like, there's literally been pretty much negligible change between LAN and online.
Right.
So I'm 100% counting this. The whole LAN versus online thing, large chunk of it's BS. So
I mean,
that's kind of all I have to say there.
I agree to an extent with the players. Like online does make a significant difference because I mean, you're on an equal footing as far as ping or any of the other settings go, and some players can have an advantage. So I mean,
It's not a huge advantage.
it's not a huge
If a
advantage.
team is better than you, they're still going to beat you like 95% of the time.
Yeah, and I'd love for it to be equal and be on land and everything like that, but it's just not possible
Yeah,
right now.
I mean, we all would love it to be on land because then we can go to the event, or I guess they
Right.
could have land with no spectators as well. It's obviously land is the fairest competitive environment. My argument is the change is so negligible that it pretty much doesn't make a difference, and it hasn't made a difference in kind of how this league has shaped up as the season shifted from land to online. And the big thing too is the only people that are complaining about this are console players. Every league, every esport is fully online right now. The League of Legends, they just held their spring championship. They're going to be holding their summer championship fully online. No one's saying, oh, that didn't count. C9, they won that. That didn't count as a championship. Yeah, they are. They're going to get their banner in the LCS studio still. Like, what? Literally, the only people that are saying this are console players because they're some of the most delusional individuals I've ever met, and some of the most delusional people exist in the COD scene.
Yeah. I mean,
No shot to console players. I'm 100% console player. I don't have a PC. I just got a dinky laptop. So, but I'm just like the majority of the people there are just like they just love making excuses, and they love having these fantastical ideas about like why they're losing or what will make them better. I mean, you can just look at Killa and his blue Ethernet cables and Nameless and his PS4 swapping.
and I think that that has to do with a lot of it, but I don't know. I don't know. I feel different. I do feel like I don't feel like the online tournaments shouldn't count. I feel like they should count because I feel like everything's kind of weird. It's at sorts, and the developers really haven't been really supportive in developing an online environment. I mean, we didn't even have 60 hertz servers for the longest time. We
Yeah, the
only got
developers
them
definitely haven't done a great job.
like so I can understand why COD players are just frustrated by and large.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration, and it seems like they're probably making a lot of moves for champs to uphold competitive integrity as much as possible. Like, we're already on 60 hertz. That's fine. It sounds like maybe potentially they're going to be adding more servers or whatever. But I don't think it should be up to the teams to do a server veto. I think that should be up to an admin to like look at all the players' locations and pick the spot that's the most neutral.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't understand why
I
that.
don't know why it's a veto up to the players. That just
I think a
seems
lot of
absurd to me.
these
It should be up to the league.
I think a lot of these problems stem from the fact that the players have
Too much
entirely too
power.
much power. Entirely too much power. And that comes with league organization. We have to remember that this league is brand new and they don't think of these things yet. This isn't, a lot of times whenever you try to solve problems, what you're doing is you have to, run into the problem first before you want to solve it. Like you don't know it's a problem until it actually just shows its face, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully, and the CDL needs to do this if they're ever going to really be taken seriously and have any sort of longevity, is they need to take the things that worked and things that didn't work and need to really figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. And they need to understand that COVID has changed the scape of how all of the world works. So they need to understand that there's going to be problems for probably the rest of forever. And they need to solve those or need to figure out how to bypass around those problems or make them as negligible as possible. These problems are not going to go away. So if the league is serious about this, which I would hope so because they just charged $25 million to each team to get in this, that's a lot of money from a lot of organizations. They're really serious about this. They they do need to, you know, take a lot of these problems seriously and stop letting the players have all this free reign because at the end of the day, that's your problem. You have guys that are frustrated with the game. Yeah, they put more time in than everybody else, and they should have a voice on things that make sense. Like, oh, hey, by the way, like, how's the meta feeling right now? Oh, well, it's pretty degenerate. All right, well, what can we do to fix it? Stuff like that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Kind of
But
have like player representatives at maybe weekly or bi-weekly meetings or something with CDL staff and developers.
I tweeted it
And at
out.
the end of the day, the CDL gets to make the decisions.
I tweeted it out. You know what they need to do? More than anything, they
What?
need to lawyer up and build a players union. That is the only way that this is ever gonna get fixed. Is if
Yeah,
we
other
decide.
esports have tried the player union. Like I know there's one for League, but I don't know like how much it actually does.
I think that with COD, it needs to happen because I think that the players feel like they don't get treated fairly. I think that the organizations are kind of lost in the sauce. I think the developers aren't giving the proper attention to the competitive scene like they should be doing. If they're
Yeah.
depending on the competitive scene to, push their game and be successful, then they need to support it. Plain and simple.
Yep.
It's a symbiotic relationship. You can't just say, "Yep, there's a competitive scene," and they just put up with whatever bullshit we throw at them. Like that's just
100% agree.
that's you're like you need to work with the league. Like there's just not enough teamwork, and I understand like communication's a little hard right now, but they need to just figure it out because, like I said, this is the new normal. you will you will not see anybody saying, "Oh, well, after COVID's over, we can go back to normal." No. What we're doing right now, things that we're doing, I hope that we can get back to a land sort of environment sometime, but right now what we're doing is probably what we're going to be doing for next COD and potentially even the COD afterwards. I mean, if we're talking about scope and impact. So, I mean, a lot of these problems stem from the fact that players have too much power, and the way that the players use that power is not sustainable for, or really not healthy for a competitive environment. Because, I mean, I think Crimsix said it the best whenever he said that you can have a bunch of teams that are looking to make excuses or change things in a way that makes the top teams work not as well. And when you do that, the top teams don't have any say in it because they can do some childish stuff like, ban them or blacklist them from scrims or blacklist them from tens, which, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that will greatly hamper a progress of a team whenever you're not able to compete against the top teams that you will be playing. Like, I think I think that is a huge, huge, huge disadvantage. But the gentleman's agreement shouldn't exist in the first place. Flatly, like, you shouldn't have to have a gentleman's agreement if your developer is actually supporting the league and changing up things. The league is, you know, setting bans and stuff like that. You have a good player representation for the bans. So, and I just feel like that hasn't happened. That didn't even really happen in Black Ops 4, but I think that they knew that they were going to switch to a more, this sort of like city-based league. So they kind of just brushed it off. But I mean, this problem has been stemming for a couple years now, almost a few years. So I'd love to say that, you know, what we're saying right now will have a change on it, but I couldn't tell you honestly.
Yeah. All right. Well, that all stemmed from just our third match in the CDL New York homestand event. That was FaZe versus the LA
Well,
Gorillas.
good news is we got
So
it out of the way, right?
yeah,
Because
we got it out of the
we
way.
we
So
were
now
we were gonna
we
talk
can
about it anyway.
breeze through the rest of these New York matches, talking about them, and then give our predictions for the London homestand event that we're going to be having, the second London homestand event. So the fourth match that we saw on the New York weekend was the New York Subliners versus the Minnesota Rocker. New York took this over the Rocker 3-1. As expected, I think for both of us, they did drop the Hackney Dom. That was a 159 to a 144, but they took the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 144. They took the St. Petro S&D 6-3, and they took the Ramazda Hardpoint 250 to 157. Both of us said that New York was going to take that either 3-2 or 3-1 over the Rocker, and that they did. Rockers' woes continue. Moving on to our fifth match that we saw on the weekend. This was our first Saturday match. It was the Atlanta FaZe versus the Toronto Ultra. And probably the upset of the tournament was the Toronto Ultra beating the Atlanta FaZe
Right.
3-2 in this series. FaZe started off hot, taking their Mazda Hardpoint 250 to 197. They lost to not St. Petrograd. They lost to Piccadilly S&D 6-3. They took the St. Petro Dom 170 to 129. They lost the Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 183, and then they lost the Mazda S&D 6-4. Now, a lot of people looked at this series, and on top of being an upset, yes, it was an upset. I don't want to take any dig at Toronto saying it wasn't an upset, because it certainly was. A lot of people are saying, why the heck is FaZe playing Ramazda Search?
Yeah, they
And
shouldn't.
I don't know if they're saying that sarcastically, or if they know the reason and they just aren't saying it, or if they actually do not know why they played Ramazda Search, because FaZe, it only played Ramazda Search once going into this event. That was the second time they'd played Ramazda Search, and they lost it. Looking at the champs format, especially the grand finals, it being a best of 9, quote unquote best of 8, because the team from winner's bracket gets to start off 1-0. You're going to be playing 3 search and destroys, you're going to be playing 3 hard points, and you're going to be playing 2 dominations. It is going to be a test of who has the deeper map pool.
Right.
At this event, it seemed like every single map the Atlanta FaZe were playing, for the most part, was them testing out kind of strategies or how they were performing on maps that they don't usually get repetitions on. And that Ramazda and the Piccadilly are like highlight examples of that. They could have played St. Petra, they could have played Arclov, they could have played Gunrunner. All of those maps they have a better record on than Piccadilly and Ramazda. They played their 2 weakest S&D maps against the Toronto Ultra. Toronto Ultra are a lower team in the bracket. Their S&D's their best game mode.
Right.
So it's like no shot at them. But this entire weekend, I'm like, honestly, FaZe was limit testing themselves on what do we need to work on these maps that we don't play that often.
Yeah, I agree. I think that FaZe something was off for sure all weekend with them, and I
I
think you're
don't
right.
I don't think anything. Well, okay, outside of the Chicago series, that one they probably weren't like. Even that one though, I feel like they were kind of picking maps that were maybe not Chicago favored, but maybe weren't their best. Like, this Toronto series was 100% them limit testing themselves though. 100% it was. They didn't play any of their best maps. Even in hardpoint they didn't. They played Ramazda hardpoint, which before that they had an 0-2 record on. They got their first win on Ramazda hardpoint this weekend against the Toronto Ultra. So, what else did they play? It was the St. Petro Dom. St. Petro, like, FaZe has been good at all Doms. They have the most reps on Hackney. They got
I think the
they have
biggest
about the
thing
same number of reps on Gunrunner and St. Petro, but
I think the biggest thing that really hampered FaZe this week was the fact that we went to a more AR heavy meta, and you have a lot of guys out there. I mean, think about like the Tiny Terrors. That the reason why they do so well is because they're just cracked out of their mind all the time.
yeah, I mean, Abeezy and Simp, they played fine this event. Like Abeezy, this was probably his best event the entire year. It was more so, I think, kind of Priesta in the flex role that struggled a bit. And I mean, Celium didn't fall off. Major Maniac looked fine, and he's got probably the toughest job
Right.
out of like the players on that team. And so it was more so just kind of Priesta lacking in some aspects. With a lot of that, I'm contributing to the AUG getting GA'd a couple days prior to the event. I mean, obviously, I 100% agree that they have things they need to work on in hard points. This was their worst S&D event, and I mean, they played Piccadilly Ramazda and then two St. Petros. Those were their first losses on St. Petrograd, so maybe not too much you can take from that. But they went 1-4 this weekend in S&D, so it was by far their worst S&D. They had a 4-2 record in hardpoint, so they weren't doing bad in hardpoint necessarily. And then Dom, they went 3-1. So it was really just their search that they were struggling in. And honestly, that's like, you look at it, it all goes kind of back to that Toronto series where they played their two worst S&D maps.
Yeah, true. And I mean, at the end of the day, I still think they did fine. I mean, it wasn't, they weren't
Yeah, they
blown out or
lost out in
anything.
the semifinals. We finally saw the Chicago FaZe matchup. And at this point, the only team that can catch them in the standings is going to be the Florida Mutineers potentially. You have Atlanta FaZe at 250 points at 8 homestands. You have Chicago Huntsmen at 220 at 8 homestands. So don't realistically see the Huntsmen overtaking FaZe. And then, like, Florida, they're going to have to get a win to be tied with Atlanta going into the last event of the year, which they'll both be at. And so, like, Atlanta, they're not dropping out of the top two. So I think this event, they were definitely testing some things against the weaker teams and maybe even scouting out Chicago, one could say. Kind of like, I don't know. I don't really know a good analogy for this. You could say it's like when, if you ever watch Dragon Ball, it's like Goku just taking a bunch of punches to the face and then, like, all of a sudden he just wins because he got to see all of your moves and he was able to memorize them or whatever and just counter you at every step you take. So I don't know. Maybe that's what FaZe was doing. They were just getting beat up this event so that
Beat up.
they would just get beat up so they could see all the moves and then come out at champs and just dominate. Who knows? But, like, yeah, they definitely have some things to work on though. I agree with you. Especially in the hard points. I don't know of too much in the S&D sense. A lot of their losses were on their two worst maps. So
I'm ready to move on if you're ready to move on to Group B winners.
yeah, Group B winners was Chicago Huntsmen versus the New York Subliners. So that the Toronto Atlanta match, that was the first one we got wrong.
Yes.
You said it was going to be a 3-2 to Atlanta. I said it was going to be 3-1 Atlanta. and it went the other way around. It was a 3-2 Toronto. So that was the first thing we had wrong. I got the Chicago-New York matchup correct. I said it was going to be a 3-2 Chicago. You said it was going to be a 3-2 New York. So that's a point for me there. But later on, obviously, you were definitely a one-up on New York by the end of this. But yeah, Chicago, they came out hot. They took the Ramazda Hardpoint 250 to 219, and then they took the Ramazda Search 6-1. They dropped the Hackney Dom and the Hackney Hardpoint. New York took that 154 to 144 and 250 to 192. And then Chicago clutched up in the Gunrunner S&D 6-3. And I believe pretty much between this and when they rematched New York, every single map stayed the same outside of, I believe, maybe one, which I think is a huge mistake. When you play a team on a map set, honestly, I don't really want to play that team on the same map set in the tournament. I would like to switch it up because more than likely they know how to fix the issues that they had. So, but I guess that's a little more kind of how comfortable they felt on certain maps over others and whatnot. And it's also a little bit of ego. I mean, you beat them the first time, you'll beat them the second time. They don't. I think that's kind of like what most teams feel, but I feel a bit differently. But yeah, that was definitely a close match. Not really too much to say there. I mean, we've been saying New York has been looking really good in this event. They certainly proved it. And I don't think there's really too many takeaways here from Chicago on anything they really need to improve on. I mean, they did find this event. They made it all the way to the finals. I think Scump definitely kind of had an off event, maybe you could say later on. If you look at kind of how he was performing on Sunday, he didn't seem to have the best of Sundays. It's a bit unfortunate we don't have the overall KDs, since I think this is probably one of Scump's rougher events, especially in the grand finals. He did not play very well at all. But you have anything to add to that one, or do you just want to move on
Oh,
to
I'm
our
I'm ready to
losers
move
bracket?
on. I'm kind of frustrated that I didn't call this one,
It was a hard
but
call. I
it
mean, it was a really hard call. You had probably the two best hardpoint teams. The past event, Chicago didn't look good in S&D, but I don't know why people have been saying S&D has been bad for them. I mean, it's been, I guess you could say their weak point, if you could really say they have a weak point. They've been above average in every single game type. Hardpoint being their strongest. Dom and S&D are probably their close second best game mode, but I mean, Chicago hasn't been bad at S&D. So I don't know why so many broadcasters were saying that. I mean, they're 21-13 in search right now, so it's not a bad record. And they went 4-1 in search on the weekend. So if you are going to play Chicago, though, never play them on St. Petrograd, which, I
right.
mean, we'll talk about that later because I know they play St. Petrograd later in this tournament against FaZe. But we're going to talk about our loser bracket match. It was the Paris Legion versus the LA Gorillas, and this was an upset. All of them were, I'm going to say upset because Paris, they've just been looking like crap. LA
Yes.
Gorillas, they had a really good showing at the last event that we saw them at, so I expected a lot more out of them at this one. However, they failed to not impress me. They failed to live up to my expectations, is what I want to say. They lost 3-0 to the Paris Legion. The Ramasa Hardpoint 250 to 228. The St. Petro S&D 6-5, and then the St. Petro Dom, it was 163 to 155. So super unfortunate for my predictions. That was the first, well, it wasn't the first thing I got wrong. The first thing was the Toronto Atlanta, but I'm giving myself the benefit of the doubt there. No one saw that one coming. This one, though, I think this one, yeah, this one I got wrong. So not too much to say there. I don't see much change. These were kind of the two bottom of the standing teams. Obviously, Gorillas looked better. They didn't look like as much of a bottom of the standings team at the last event we had saw on the map, but this event kind of just proves that, yeah, they're still bottom of the standings team. Our other losers bracket match in Group B, it was the London Royal Ravens versus Minnesota Rocker, and London Royal Ravens took this 3-2 over the Minnesota Rocker. It was a lot closer of a series. Actually, it wasn't. I got this one completely right. You know what I said in the prior podcast? I said this was going to be 3-2 London Royal Ravens. I believe you said it was going to be, well, you had, I think, Minnesota versus Chicago, or no. Who the heck did you have in your predictions?
Wait, in the Group B losers?
Yeah, no, Group E losers, you also had London,
Yeah, I
Minnesota.
had
I
London,
don't know.
Minnesota.
Yeah, yeah. But you said Minnesota was going to take this. And you said they were going to take it 3-1. And I remember I convinced you that they were going to take that they either had to take it 3-1 or they're going to lose 3-2 because Minnesota sucks at S&D.
Right.
That's been a proven fact throughout the whole season. Their current S&D record is 11-23. So, really really bad. And I said, and I quote, this match is going to come down to the Azir hardpoint. I'm pretty sure I got the pick bands like 100% right outside of the St. Petro hardpoint. I thought it was going to go to Hackney hardpoint, not St. Petro. St. Petro and what's the other hardpoint map? St. Petro and Ramazda, they both had like around a 50-50% on. So I thought it was probably going to go to Hackney, and Azir Cave was going to be Minnesota's pick. And it did come down to that Azir Cave hard point, and London was able to take it. So I feel really good about that prediction. Just saying, I saw it coming. I was right. This was pretty much like the perfect prediction for me. Was this singular match here of London Royal Ravens versus the Minnesota Rockers? So I'm super happy about that. But just a little pat on my back right there.
Right. And you know what? Like, I thought that Minnesota was really going to show up this event. You know,
I was getting nervous leading up to it because on the barracks, Silly was saying their scrims had been going extremely well. So I was getting a bit nervous, stretching out the collar a bit, but I was happy to see the London boys clutch up. But yeah, London sucks at Dom. That's another takeaway we can take from this. As bad as Minnesota is at S&D, London Royal Ravens are really bad at domination.
Yeah, and what's funny is that London and Atlanta were in probably the best domination game this entire season together, and I think it came down. It was like a 145 to 144, 143 or something like that. I mean, it was neck and neck the entire time, and like I think the points changed. Oh gosh, I think the lead changes were like every like 15 seconds. It was just a neck and neck battle the entire time. So I know they have it in them. I just don't understand why they can't go the distance.
Yeah. Moving on to a matchup that I don't think we saw happening, but that I think if we did, we would definitely say it would be the same outcome, was the Atlanta FaZe versus the Paris Legion. Atlanta FaZe took that 3-0 over the Paris Legion. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, or easy AF, easy as Atlanta FaZe, whatever you want to hashtag it on Twitter. FaZe took Gunrunner Hardpoint 250 to 174. They took the St. Petro S&D 6-3, and then they took the Gunrunner Dom 169 to 142. And once again, you see here, they played Gunrunner Dom, which is Paris Legion's best domination map by far. I mean, if we go to their record on Gunrunner Dom prior to this event, they were 7-2 on Gunrunner Dom. They're now 7-3. So that was by far their best domination map. They're 0-4 on Hackney, and they're 2-5 on St. Petro. So Atlanta FaZe could have played them on either of those maps, but they decided not to. They decided they wanted to play them on Gunrunner because they're preparing for champs and getting ready. Like this whole event, man. Like I don't know why no one saw this, but I saw it glaringly. So I can't be the only one. And then they played them on St. Petro, which their other S&D map, Paris Legion is good at, is their Gunrunner. They're 3-1 on Gunrunner, and then they're 5-5 on St. Petro. So all the other maps, Arklov, they're 1-3 on. Piccadilly, they haven't played at all. And then Ramazda, they're 3-4. So St. Petro, one of their better S&D maps, I guess you could say, for the Paris Legion. But like this whole event, man, I'm telling you, FaZe is they're just testing the waters. But that was our losers bracket finals for Group A. FaZe make it on in the second seed, and so we'll finally see that Chicago Huntsmen versus Atlanta FaZe matchup. Our last losers bracket match was the London Royal Ravens versus the New York Subliners, and London Royal Ravens did not take that. I'm sorry, like Easy Mac only has the first hard point up in the stats, so I'm going to have to go over to my box scores because I actually went through and watched the film to get that real quick to see what that outcome was. I do believe it was a 3-1 for the New York Subliners. London took the first domination. They took that on Gunrunner 250 to 215. After that, though, New York kind of turned on the afterburns. Were like, we're not losing our homestand event.
Right.
And they took St. Petrograd S&D. They took that 6-5. That was actually incredibly close. Definitely could have gone either way there. And
that was actually probably the game of the week. That single game was
that St. Petrograd. Yeah, that was actually pretty nutty because you think if New York loses that, it goes to a game 5. It could have gone dicey. Could have definitely gotten dicey for the New York Subliners. As good as they did show in Search and Destroy this weekend they went 4-2 in Search. So a lot better than what they have been doing. It seems to really only stem from 2 maps. They're a Mazda, they're 7-2 on. And then St. Petrograd, they're 5-1 on. And then you look at their other S&D records, Arklov Peak, they're 4-6, which is respectable. But then you look at Gunrunner and Piccadilly. Gunrunner, they're 0-6 on, and Piccadilly, they're 0-3 on. So one of those maps is going to get through at some point in Pick and Bans, unless teams just, for some reason, want to avoid those at all costs, which if I see a team's got a 0-3 record on one of those, and a 0-6 on the other, I'm going with one of those maps. I don't care, like I don't know why you would take Petro or Ramasa unless you're Chicago.
right.
You can take that Petro, but yeah. So New York clutches up in that St. Petrograd S&D. I believe Donnie went crazy in that round 11. I believe he got like 4 kills. He just gunned through some smoke, destroyed, like he hit a nade on someone, gunned 2 people, and then he got like a 4th. He got the final kill on a beatdown on Weskins. So yeah, that was Temp clutching up big there. And then
you could tell the entire event that Donnie wanted to win this. He knew for a fact that like he had a chance. And to be honest, like New York has been playing really, really well recently. It was, like I said, it was only a matter of time before they popped off.
They've been playing really, really well since, like, I think the first time we saw Mac Melts.
Yes.
On the roster. Like, after that first event, I'm like, obviously you got to give them that 3-event rule simply because we've seen too many teams show up one event and then do crap the next.
Right, unless you're Florida.
Yeah, well, we've seen plenty of teams do that. Florida not being one of them. That's why you have that 3-event rule. New York passed the 3-event rule, but like even after the second event, I kept on saying they were the second best team at that event, even though they would lose in semis and they wouldn't make it to a final. But yeah, they take the Hackney Yard Dom. They take that 181 to 142, and they played only Hackney Yard Dom this entire weekend. They played 5 Hackney Yard Doms.
I mean, if it ain't broke.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They have a winning record on that map now. They're 9-8 on Hackney Yard Dom. This weekend they were 4-1 on domination, so a lot better since that 9-game loss streak in domination at the start of the season. But I think like if you look, the first event that they came back, they lost all their doms with Mac Melts, but since that event, they got above, like, let's see, they got, I don't know how to really, I can actually do this really quick. If you get rid of their events with that out Mac Melts, they're 11-9 in Dom. If you get rid of their first event with Mac Melts, they're 11-6 in Dom. So they definitely have improved in domination over the year. They still have never played St. Petrograd Dom though. So
honestly, they might just be banning it the entire time.
Yeah, they are 100% banning it the entire time. I guarantee that because I know accuracy, and I know that there are certain times where he just did not like a map. One example being London Dock CTF.
Oh my God!
World War II. He banned it the entire year. He never played it. You look at TK, they never played London Docks the entire year. Maybe they played it like once at the beginning, but at a certain point they like, never played it like the rest of the year,
Which
and
I mean, I think it's
I
smart because
guarantee that's kind of the same thing that's happening here. But with the format for the grand finals, at least, this could come back to bite them,
right,
depending on how they do picking bans, or even if there are bans for Dom, since there's only 3 maps. Like, who gets the ban? So, like the whole thing with the best of 8, best of 9, whatever it is, since they only play 8 games max, they play 8 games max because the team from winners starts up 1-0, which I think's a bad idea. I understand you got to give the team from winners bracket some type of advantage, but I honestly think it's enough of an advantage to just give them like team pick if they want to be team A or team B. I think that is honestly probably a big enough advantage.
right.
With it being a best of 9 and how deep the map pool is going to go. I don't, because like you think about it, like, okay, because I'm pretty sure everything's up to a coin flip on who gets to pick to be team A or team B. That team from winners bracket, let's say they win coin flip, they're already up 1-0. They're probably going to get, like, depending on like how the process works, they could only be playing in like the first couple of maps their best maps. And so they could be up 4-1 before like you've even gone halfway through the map set.
Yeah,
which
you're not wrong.
which to me is just like kind of a little ridiculous. So that's like my small opinion on that. I don't think they should start up 1-0. They either should do a bracket reset or they should just do a best of 9 and they give the team from winners side pick, I guess, if they want to be team A or team B. I think that's probably plenty, but
Yeah, I mean, I
that
think
was. Oh yeah, sorry. No, you have
yeah,
more.
no, I agree with that. I don't think that I think we're putting a lot of I think they're putting a lot of stock in having that perfect record. Yeah, there should be a little incentive to to doing well, but at the end of the day, like there's $2 million on the line. I'd be pretty peeved if I was already down 1-0 just because I lost a map way early on and then I got to the same point that the winners team got to. Like we're
Yeah,
both
I think
here.
they changed it. I don't think first gets 2 mil anymore. I think they get 1.5. They like redistributed some of the prizing because it's online,
Right, but I mean at the end of the day, like that's still
which
a
I don't
lot
know
of
how they
money.
managed to finagle that because, as we said, standings haven't realistically changed since moving to online. So all they're doing is kind of helping the teams out that suck and don't want to get better, and then use
Right.
online as an excuse. So yeah, New York, they beat London. I think we both predicted that would happen if we did see this matchup. I'm trying to see here. Yeah, so you had Chicago versus Minnesota in this. You already had New York into winners, and you already had London bowing out to Minnesota, as we said. So,
Yeah, I had London in the or sorry, I had Minnesota in the semis, which
yep,
I mean,
because of the Atlanta Chicago curse
right.
matchup.
Yeah, and I didn't think that Atlanta and Chicago were gonna play this weekend,
But they
but
did, but they
they
also
did.
kind of didn't, since, as we'll see, moving on to that semifinal, it was a 3-0 for Chicago.
Yeah, that was
Really
filthy.
convincingly, too. Hackney Hardpoint went to Chicago 250 to 160. St. Petro S&D went to Chicago 6-1. And then Hackney Dom went to Chicago 166 to 149. Once again, Atlanta FaZe picked the best S&D map, or left open the best S&D map for their opponent. They left open St. Petrograd S&D,
Right.
which for Chicago, you don't do that. They're 4-4 on Arkloff Peak, 6-3 Gunrunner, 3-2 Piccadilly, 2-3 Ramasta. St. Petrograd, they're 6-1. And their one loss, they lost in a round 11. So pretty much they're 7-0 on St. Petrograd S&D. Don't play them on St. Petrograd S&D. You get one ban for S&D. Use it on St.
Yeah,
Petrograd.
for sure. Yeah,
Like, why would you not?
especially with the kind of
It doesn't make sense.
crazy plays I've seen from well, mostly Envoy. I think Envoy plays
Yeah.
that map better than anybody in in CDL right now. I don't think there's a single player better than Envoy is on Petrograd Search. But I mean, they just it feels like they just do everything right on there, and it seems like they always have the best reads. Um, there's some times where other teams will show up and it'll be great, but
Yeah,
for the
I
most part,
mean, on average, so in total on St. Petrograd for their wins, they have a 36 and 17 round win to loss record on St. Petrograd for their wins. Meaning teams are on average getting less than 3 round wins against them on St. Petrograd. So it's like it's not even close. It's not even close. So yeah, just take my advice as a spectator and not a coach. Just ban St. Petrograd. Like I understand. Okay, this solidified that FaZe was limit testing this entire event. Like honestly, there's been a lot of proof of it with the Toronto series, with the Paris series, even somewhat in the Chicago series with that St. Petrograd. Because the other S&D map was Gunrunner S&D, which is Chicago's second best S&D map. Like, come on.
right,
Like they didn't get there, but the second S&D map based on Easy Max stats and what's written there was a Gunrunner S&D. So like, and one of the hard points was Ramazda hard point. It's like it's just so obvious. So I don't
well,
know
you
how
say
much
that.
we can chalk. Like I don't know how much we can chalk up Chicago being better than FaZe or FaZe just trying stuff out because they have the room to in the standings. Obviously, they would like to get some money, but do they want to get the money now or do they want to get a larger amount of money at the end of the season by testing things out against teams that they'll probably end up facing at some point in the bracket?
Right.
But yeah. So congratulations, Chicago. We finally got the matchup. It was a 3-0. A little bit disappointing there. Would have definitely liked to see it go to at least a game 4, hopefully a game 5. But we have a good chance of seeing this matchup at Champs. So not going to cry about it too much. Moving on to our other semifinals, though, it was Toronto Ultra versus New York Subliners, and this was also a 3-0. Actually, everything on Sunday was a 3-0, so it was super quick, somewhat entertaining, somewhat disappointing, but yeah, New York gave a swift hand to Toronto. It was a 3-0. I'm not really going to kind of go back and repeat what the match scores were. I'll just let you know it was a 3-0. New York move on to the finals. Toronto fall out. They net themselves a nice 20 points there, so that's going to be very helpful for them and their aspirations of not starting in the losers bracket at champs. So, and then our grand finals, it was the Chicago Huntsmen versus the New York Subliners, and this was pretty much a complete one-to-one matchup for the first time they faced, except the New York Subliners absolutely decimated them this time around. It was pretty much the same maps. I believe the first 3 maps were the same. Not 100% certain on that. I
Right.
can actually check real quick here. Yeah. So the Dom was the same. The S&D was the same. And the first hard point was the same. And that's as far as the series got. So yeah, the first hard point was pretty close, but honestly, New York kind of won that on the back of Zuma, making some incredibly clutch plays and coming up from behind Chicago and kind of screwing them up as they were trying to make these rotations to hills or trying to break into hills. New York won that 250 to 238, and then the rematch on Ramasa Search, Chicago took that, or not Chicago, New York took that 6-4. So relatively close, but also not close. A big increase from losing 6-1 just the day prior. So, or was it the day prior or was it 2 days prior? The day, yeah, it was, yeah, no, it was the day prior. And then domination, I believe they took that both times around. So definitely some big improvements from New York on the side of domination. But yeah.
Right. No, I think New York did phenomenal, especially with a 3-0 on Chicago after Chicago just freshly 3-0'd Atlanta. I mean, that's got to speak volumes.
Yeah. And it's something about, Zoom and Attach and Optic teams. They just never remember to look behind them because that's probably where you'll find Zuma.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, everyone on kind of New York went big this weekend and in this series. You kind of had players showing up. And I mean, you never had anyone really performing bad, but you always had someone in the series really showing up and kind of putting the spotlight on them with some crazy plays and search and destroy. You can go back to some of the temp plays and hard points. You can go to zoom and attach, even accuracy. Honestly, the player that kind of didn't stand out too much this event, at least when I was watching, was Mac Meltz. He was kind of just there doing his job and doing it incredibly well, uh, but he was kind of outshone by a bunch of the other New York players really stepping up and doing what they needed to do to pull out the win. I think kind of about time since Mac had been pulling his weight for quite a while, and some of the players on New York weren't at some of the prior events. One could probably say, but yeah, about time. I mean, New York has had kind of the best overall team KD at a lot of these events. I mean, you can go back at some of the podcasts or go back and look at some of the stats. I mean, your overall KDs at some of the events were the best. They were all like every player on the team was above a 1.0. I think maybe like only one player was ever like below it at an event. But yeah, this event they were finally able to bring all the pieces together and finally able to clutch up and bring home a W. The second team to win a home series. They break the curse, the long drought of the homestand defense. And so congratulations, New York. Congratulations to Mac, and congratulations to Temp on getting their first championships. Donnie Temp is no longer chipless.
I know. I think I saw like 829 days or something.
Yeah, I mean, not as impressive as Clayster's drought, but
Yeah.
it's still a decent drought in and of itself. And with that, New York catapult themselves up to 5th place in the standings, where I do not see them losing that spot. I see them holding that above Minnesota Rocker for the rest of the season. So I guess a recap of the standings after that. You have Atlanta FaZe at 250 points, 8 events played. Chicago Huntsmen at 220 points, 8 events played. Florida Mutineers at 200 points, 7 events played. Dallas Empire right behind them at 190 points, 7 events played. New York Subliners 130, 8 events played. Minnesota Rocker 120, 8 events played. London Royal Ravens 100 points, 8 events played. Optic Gaming LA 70 points, 7 events played. Paris Legion and Toronto Ultra both at 70 points as well, with 8 events played. Seattle Surge 50 points, 8 events played, and then the LA Gorillas at 50 points, 7 events played. So in the bottom of the standings, it's very likely that Optic Gaming LA is going to be in that 8th place spot by the end of the season, simply because they have 2 more events and 1 event without Toronto and Paris attending to kind of widen, to actually create a gap in separation, since they're all currently tied at 70 points. Don't see them making it up to 7th place, where the London Royal Ravens are at 100 points. That's a 30-point gap. Optic Gaming would have to make a semifinals to tie them, and then I don't see them outplacing the London Royal Ravens unless they have an incredibly easy group at the final event of the year. Seattle Surge probably going to end in last place, since the Gorillas have an extra event to kind of add a gap. Don't really know. Actually, I think that actually going to be very important, which team between Seattle and the Gorillas ends up in last place, because more than likely they'll end up having to face the Toronto Ultra, which have looked a much better team than the Paris
Oh yeah,
Legion.
absolutely.
So that's a
Well,
bit of a scary scenario for kind of the last place teams. And then I think no one wants to end up in the 8th place spot, because then they're going to have to face New York. And if New York continues kind of how they were, their performance at champs as they had at their homestand, then that's more or less a death sentence for that 8th place team.
yeah, true. And like I said, we'll see. We'll see as the league kind of plays out. It, like I said, it's not too early to be talking about champs, because I feel like it's right around the corner. But I mean, some teams are still trying to fill themselves out, and Paris won a match, so at least they did better than what I thought they were going to do for the rest of the season. So I don't
Yeah.
know, at least
I
full of
mean,
surprises.
Optic, apparently, people have been saying they've been doing good in scrims. However, as we can see from Silly's interview on the Barracks, scrims does not necessarily translate to success at
No.
tournaments. So maybe Optic still sucks. Will be interesting to see since we'll see them at this London event and then we'll see them at the Toronto event. Interestingly enough, the Toronto is going to be playing OGLA in Group A. So if Toronto beats OGLA, that's going to be their kind of ticket and their chance to pass them up in the standings into 8th place and start in winner's bracket, which I don't like. Yes, obviously you want to do that, but then they're going to have to play New York, which is more than likely going to be an immediate loss for them.
Yeah.
So I guess not too much, but it will be nice to see if they like that matchup at the end of the season, Toronto versus OG. I think that's going to be a very interesting one to watch simply because of how much impact it can have on the standings. The Group B for that last event is very interesting because you got Atlanta, Minnesota, Florida, and Dallas in a group. And then, so Minnesota is not going to get any points there. And then in the Group A with Toronto and OG, you have Chicago and Seattle. So Chicago can get a lot of points in that last event. And because of that, they're probably going to end higher than Dallas. So they're probably going to end third. Obviously, it's too early to see.
Yeah, true.
I say we'll just go back to this topic once we have the end of this London event. But I say we jump into our predictions for this London event to try and wrap up this podcast, as it's currently been about an hour and 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
gotta try and reach the end of it before that 2-hour mark for all of you people. First matchup is going to be Optic Gaming LA versus Florida Mutineers. Don't realistically seeing Optic Gaming LA take that. Florida's been really good. People have been saying Optics looked 100% better, but that scrims, who knows
Yeah, not to mention like
how that will translate.
think about all the Optic fanboys still. You know, like I hate to take stock in what the Optic fanboys say because they're always gonna be like, oh yeah, Optic's looking great right now. Like, you
I
know,
think it was Accuracy that said Optic's been looking better.
well, I mean, accuracy's a little bit more of a viable source, but I
Yeah.
mean, it's not hard to improve on garbage too. So I mean, like
Yeah, it's not
to
hard to
quote
improve on losing 250 to 50. So
a famous Captain Price, you know. So yeah, I mean, they have a
yeah,
lot to
in
go,
my
and
my predictions, I got a lot of 3-1s this event, or at least for the first opening matches.
that's fair.
But yeah, Florida over Optic. You also have that. The next matchup, London versus Seattle. I say London 3-1. You have London 3-2. If it does go a game 5, yeah, definitely think London's taking it. London's been a better search team than Seattle all year, even with kind of the improvement that we saw in Seattle at the past event. I mean, we saw an improvement from Gorillas at a past event, and then they were awful at the next one. So, not putting too much stock in just one event, putting stock in the season.
Right.
London over Seattle. 100% agree with you there. Group B, first matchup is New York versus the LA Gorillas. We both have a 3-1. Couldn't agree more. 3-1. New York probably going to lose the S&D, I would say, unless we see something crazy. I mean, LA's looked really good in search. Obviously, they faltered a bit this weekend in their search and destroy, but they've still been looking incredibly strong. And New York's been looking incredibly strong in the respawns. They've been looking a lot better in their DOMs. So definitely going to say, yeah, 3-1. Could get scary if they drop that DOM, but
I don't see that happening.
I think New York's improved enough that I could see them going 50-50 in S&Ds with a Gorillas lineup.
Oh yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
moving on.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to move on to our Dallas Paris matchup, which we're both agreeing. Yeah, Dallas is going to take that in the end. I say 3-1, you say 3-0. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that they take one map, but
I don't.
yeah,
No, I definitely.
Dallas has been better all year. They're going to continue to be better, and those are honestly some probably pretty boring matchups for Friday. To be honest, a lot of those I feel like are relatively cut and dry, barring any upsets. To be honest, I mean all these teams are bottom of the standings. OG, Seattle, LAG, and Paris. That's your bottom 5 teams. So don't really see too many upsets occurring there. A little bit more interesting are going to be our Saturday matchups, where we're going
Yes.
to have Florida versus London in Group A as our first one. You're saying that's going to be a 3-1 for Florida. I'm going to agree that's going to be a 3-1 for Florida as well. I don't know which maps are going to go which way, but I definitely see Florida taking it in the end. They've just been too good, and
They've
London
been too
hasn't
good.
hasn't really shown that they can beat teams that are above them in the standings. Second matchup is going to be New York versus Dallas in our Group B winners. And you're saying Dallas is going to take this 3-2 over New York.
Yeah,
Yeah, this
so
one's difficult for me. This one's definitely, I feel like it could go either way. Like New York just looked dominant at their homestand event. So it's definitely going to be hard. I kind of want to agree with you, but I also kind of don't, just for kind of having a different opinion, maybe trying to construct an argument against it.
I think the big thing here is that we have New York coming off a really hot event, but you still have to remember that we're talking about Dallas, and Dallas has been one of the most consistent performers of the entire season, arguably as consistent, if not more consistent, than Atlanta. So you couple that with a much more solid search and destroy team, arguably one of the best search and destroy teams in the game. You could argue that New York probably takes the
I
dom off of
think
Dallas.
Dallas actually has the best round to win loss percentage in search and destroy now. After Atlanta's poor performance this weekend,
Right.
Atlanta, their total round win to loss percentage in search and destroy, they're at a 54.59%. Barely below them is the Gorillas at a 54.55%. And then above them is the Dallas Empire at a 55.12 round win to loss percentage.
They're
So
close. I mean, they're really close.
they're close, but Dallas currently is the best S&D team in the game. If you look at round win to loss percentage, not obviously their map record. I think Atlanta still has the beaten there. They're 26-14 in S&D. Dallas is 21-13 in S&D. So, but if you're going by like the total round win to loss percentage, Dallas is quote unquote the best search team in the game. After Atlanta went and played their worst S&D maps. So
Yeah, and like I said, I think barring this event, before this event, I should say, yeah, it was probably a toss up between Atlanta and Dallas. I think I probably would have given it to Atlanta, but right now, like I said, they're both on top of the world, and I definitely don't think that New York is in that same discussion. So while I do think that New York has a great respawn game going for them, Dallas, I mean, like you have to give them both searches. And New York hasn't been, you know, too great at domination, but they've gotten better. So you have that going for them. But I don't know. It's just, I really do feel like it's going to come down to the search and destroy. And if we're going to talk about search, then we have to talk about how Dallas is probably the best search team in the game. So,
it's just interesting because it's like, okay, I favor New York in the hard points. Dallas, they're 23-23. New York is 26-21 in hard point currently as their overall records. There's not really a strong hard point map for the Dallas Empire outside of like their Hackney Yard, which they're 6-2 on. So it's like, do I want to say convincingly New York is going to take both hard points, and then can they sneak out an S&D against Dallas, or can they sneak out a domination against Dallas? That's kind of like what it's coming down to here.
I
I
mean,
feel like there's definitely an argument there somewhere, but I think at the end of the day, I'm going to have to agree with you. I think Dallas is going to take this 3-2.
I
I
mean,
was I was thinking maybe New York could take it, but
if they can
I
get it 3-1, that might be it. But I mean, like Dallas is all around a very solid team, and I don't really think that the MP5 nerf hurts them at all. I think you have two really great performers in Ilya and Shotzi, coupled with some COD legends. Clayster and Crim Six and Hook is definitely not somebody you're just like, oh, it's just Hook, whatever.
yeah, but the thing is that like you look at their S&Ds, the S&Ds that New York is really good at are the ones Dallas sucks at. And the ones that New York sucks at are the ones Dallas is good at. You look at New York's record on Gunrunner and Piccadilly, which is a combined 0-9 record on that. And you look at Dallas's record on Gunrunner and Piccadilly, and they're combined 15-6 on that. On the opposite side, you look at Dallas's Ramazda and Petro, which they're 3-3 total on. Ramazda, they're 1-2. Petro, they're 2-1 on. And then you look at the side of New York, where Ramazda, they're 7-2 on that one. And then St. Petrograd, they're 5-1 on that. So, and you only get one ban.
Right.
And like, so they're like 100%. They're probably not going to play Arklov because that's their closest map. Like Dallas, they're 3-4 on that. New York, they're 4-6. Neither team's probably going to pick Arklov Peak. So Dallas is either going to pick Gunrunner or Piccadilly. And then on the opposite side, New York's going to pick Ramazda or Petrograd. Whichever of those two the other team doesn't ban, that's what they're going to play. So it's very likely that New York can take an S&D off of Dallas. It's just, will they get there? Will they get to that game 5? Or like, will New York's pick of S&D be in the search, and Dallas takes a hard point, and then they take the Dom? Because I think I'm relatively confident in saying Dallas should probably take the Dom, even though New York, they went 4-1 on Hackney hardpoint or Hackney domination this past weekend, and they've been looking super strong on that map specifically. I mean, Dallas could just ban that away, but you look at Dallas, that's their best domination map by a mile. They're 10-3 on Hackney Yard Dom. So they're other the Gunrunner, they're 4-4, which is about what New York is, and then St. Petrograd, which obviously that's going to be banned for New York, so I'm not even going to talk about Dallas's record.
Yeah.
So like this series is going to be very hotly contested. This series is going to come down to who can take the hard points.
Right. I think they probably split the hard points too. So I think both of them are very solid hard point teams.
It's just going to be it. Yeah, like the more I'm thinking about it, it's got to be a 3-1 or a 3-2 for one of the teams. It's just which team do you think is going to clutch up and take the map that they aren't supposed to? I'm gonna play it safe. Yeah, I'll just.
I mean, you know, you want to give it to Dallas, right?
But then I'm agreeing with you so much, and every time we agree a lot, I feel
things go sideways.
Things go sideways.
All right, this is the tournament that Paris wins. Then
I'm giving it to New York. I'm gonna say 3-2 New York. I'm just gonna. It's whatever. This is gonna be the closest matchup we probably see this weekend, simply based on me thinking about it right there. Great analysis. But,
perfect, flawless analysis.
Yeah, we're gonna move on now to our Group A losers round 1. It's gonna be OG LA versus Seattle. You're giving it to OG LA 3-1 over Seattle. I'm gonna say 3-2 OG LA. I don't like that they're complaining so much. I honestly would love to see Seattle win this just so I can hear Slasher cry more on Twitter.
Yeah, but I mean, that's unlikely.
But yeah, it is relatively unlikely. So going to move on to another interesting bottom of the bracket or bottom of the standings matchup with LAG versus the Paris Legion. This is actually going to be a rematch.
Right.
And so I don't know what I want to say here. I don't want to say LAG is going to win this like I said last time, and then they just get 3-0'd stomped by Paris, or do I want to say Paris is going to win this and then they get 3-0'd stomped by LAG? Honestly, the matchups after the initial matchups, like all of these Saturday matchups could go either way
could go either
until
way.
losers round 2. Like
right.
Both of the winners round 1 matchups could go either way. Both of the losers round 1 matchups could go either way. It's not until losers round 2 where we finally get another sense of certainty in these predictions.
I mean,
gosh, dude, like, do I really want to say Paris?
I mean, if you got to.
All the maps were close. What was it? It was 250, like 230, and then
No,
it
they
was a
were all
6 to
really close.
5,
That's the
and then
thing. And I think these two match up really, really well together. And I'm just going with LA. If you go with Paris, then one of us has got to be right. So, and you could hold that over my head.
yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause at the end of the
I
day,
can't see Paris taking both searches though.
at the
It's a
end of the day,
thing.
neither of us are going to be right. It's just who's going to
I
be
gotta
more
I gotta
right.
go LAG 3-2 over Paris.
See, it's a gut feeling. It really
It's
is.
not a gut feeling. It's just like I have more faith in LAG to take a respawn off of Paris than I do Paris to take 2 searches off of LAG. Like they won that St. Petra 6-5, but like isn't St. Petrograd Paris's best S&D map?
Yes,
I'm gonna check real quick. Oh, yeah,
it should be.
yeah, they're
I've watched
well, they're
enough of
yeah, they're
Paris.
well,
Like,
it's Gunrunner. They're 3-1 on Gunrunner, but they're 5-5 on Petro. So
they
do with that what you may.
right, but I mean, I think
Um,
a couple of times that they've played
wait,
Petro has been like against
Gorillas
Chicago.
suck at Petro. Gorillas are 0-4 on Petro.
Yeah, they're gonna ban it probably.
Well, now they should, yeah. They're 0-4 on it. What the hell were they doing playing that? They're 6-3 Gunrunner. Just play Gunrunner, guys. Come on. And
Yeah,
they're
but
6-2 Arcloth, 4-1 Piccadilly, and 1-0 Romasta.
I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like I said,
No,
like
you Gorillas got this. They got this. You're just gonna ban Petro. I don't even know why that was a contested point. Yeah, easy. All right. Group A, losers round 2. London versus Optic. I believe we're both in agreement on that. Yes. London's going to take this 3-1. Not even going to bother analyzing that.
yeah, I mean
It's
London's
Optic.
London's better than
You
Optic.
know what? 3-2 just for the giggles.
Yeah.
All right. Losers B or Group B losers round 2. I have Dallas versus LAG. And yeah, I'm giving that to Dallas 3-1 over LAG. And you have New York versus LAG. You give it to New York 3-1 over LAG. Both in agreement there. That's what we're expecting, barring some type of upset in which LAG takes like a respawn and is able to extend the series to some more S&Ds where they've been thriving. But going on to our semifinals, you have Florida versus New York. I have Florida versus Dallas. And then, so you have Florida taking that over New York 3-2. I'm going to have Florida taking this over Dallas 3-2 as well. Dallas has been, I think, the worst team in game fives.
Yeah, they've been
So
pretty
I don't think
historically
I'm ever
bad.
really, I don't think I'm ever going to take Dallas in a game 5 till they start showing that they can actually win some game 5s. So going to take Florida in that. Honestly, probably could be a 3-1 or maybe not a 3-0. I'd be surprised if it was a 3-0, 3-1, 3-2 is a little more realistic for a Florida Dallas matchup. Florida New York, that one was incredibly close and contested. You have Florida incredibly strong hardpoint team, New York an incredibly strong hardpoint team as well. And New York and Chicago have been like the only teams that have been able to take hardpoints off of Florida the past couple events they've been at. So that one's definitely going to be very interesting. Maybe, I mean, New York was up 2-0 against them, and then they kind of choked. They had that reverse sweep, so who knows how that one could go. But you're going to say Florida over New York. I'm going to say Florida over Dallas. We're both agreeing it's going to be contested series 3-2. Moving on to our second semifinals, you're going to have Dallas versus London. You're going to have Dallas take that 3-1 over London, and I'm going to have New York versus London, and I'm going to say 3-1 as well. Out of the semifinals teams, New York or London's definitely the weakest one. And so I think anyone they get matched up against, they're realistically going to lose to, whether it be Dallas, New York. They can't get matched up against Florida. So barring some kind of upset, I would say, from London or maybe some crazy happenings in Group B, I think the semifinals is as far as London is going to get, which won't be bad for them if they can make it to a semifinals. They'll pass the Minnesota Rocker in points,
Right.
which doesn't change their standing at all because they'll still have to face the Minnesota Rocker in the first round. So it's kind of whatever at that point, but still good for them. They get to put, I guess, a little more of a gap between them and Optic in case some miracle happens and they're able, like, Optic's able to take London's spot or whatever. But moving on to our finals, you're going to have Florida versus Dallas. I'm going to have Florida versus New York.
Little flip flop.
And I'm going to give it to Florida 3-2 over New York. These are back-to-back events, though. Back-to-back-to-back events, though, for New York, which could be incredibly interesting if they start to just take that momentum and ride it all the way throughout the rest of the season. Because we saw Florida, when they played a back-to-back event, it was the same outcome. They won it both weekends in a row.
Right.
So we definitely could see the same thing here with New York. And so I almost, like, it wouldn't be surprising if New York take this. It would be like slightly surprising simply with how dominant Florida has been. However, it wouldn't be like mind blowing.
No.
But in the end, I'm going to have to give it to Florida. I kind of want to give this event to Dallas simply because, for whatever reason, but I just can't see them beating Florida based on kind of the last times we've seen Dallas versus Florida, that matchup. And then, yeah, I think Florida's just kind of shown at least
Florida's still the best
consistently.
team in the game.
Yeah, they're
Bar
currently
none.
still the best team in the game. Until proven otherwise, they're currently still the best team in the game.
Yeah, and
I think if you're looking at that, Chicago finally moved up into that A category with Atlanta, with Dallas. New York, hell, they might have moved up as well into that A category. They're certainly on their own in B category if we're not putting them into A. And then you have London, Minnesota chilling in like C. And then
yeah,
probably Toronto on their own in D, maybe inching towards C, and then you kind of got the rest of the guys all hanging out in
sucking.
E
They're
or
just
F or whatever
they're just
you want
sucking.
to do it, label it as, yeah. So yeah, that's those are our predictions for the second London homestand event. We're both predicting Florida to win this one, so that would be their fourth homestand victory. Should put them two above everyone else in the league and kind of really undoubtedly solidify themselves as the best team in the game. But yeah, so those are our predictions. Should be a fun weekend, and I'm super excited that we're just going to have back-to-back events. I mean, I'm always super sad when we don't have some Call of Duty on the weekend to watch, so this kind of whole month is going to be a lot of fun, and then we got Champs just shortly after that, which going to have a special guest on for that podcast, so be sure to tune into that one.
Special guest.
Yeah, special guest. So hope you guys all have a fantastic weekend. I hope you guys all enjoy the matches. I hope they are going to be stellar. And yep, stay happy, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys next time.
Later.